Greetings, class. Welcome to week 7, putting the competencies to work. In this week, we are going to cover 4 chapters. Chapter 17, Systems Approach to Leadership Development. Systems approach is a very common approach that is applied in different disciplines. So we will see how it can be applied in leadership development. Chapter 18 and chapter 19 discusses about coaching, mentoring, what's the difference between a coach, what's the difference between a mentor, how do we find these coaches, and how do we find these mentors, and how do we effectively utilize their capabilities so that we can learn from them, and we can advance our leadership competencies. Finally, we look at the adaptability and how effectively we can put the 360-degree practice, 360-degree leadership competencies to practice. Now, over the last 6 weeks, we covered 16 leadership competencies between 4 major domains. The first domain is well-cultivated self-awareness. We looked at 2 major competencies. How do we lead with conviction? What is emotional intelligence? How do we effectively use emotional intelligence? And the different aspects of emotional intelligence. So all of these 16 competencies have a framework by which we learned, we discussed, we debated, we watched several videos, we prepared our assignments accordingly. And now we are into the leadership self-development plan. So these competencies are the guiding force. They all go through a systematic framework on what is that competencies, how can we learn these competencies, and what are the different aspects of learning. If you do not demonstrate that competency, what would be the impact? Now, on the other spectrum, if you misuse or overuse these competencies, what would happen? And what are the different ways by which you can improve those competencies? And finally, a wrapping up of the discussion. So that framework, what I call it, is an action-oriented framework. Now, this course, when we started, I believe I mentioned that this course, unlike any other course, are significant aspects of learning which we can directly utilize to transform ourselves. In this case, the different leadership capabilities which we can bring to the table in different situations. So if you master all of these 16 competencies, you will become an exceptional leader as promised by Carson and Andrew. When I reflect my 2+ decades in leadership, I fully agree with both Carson and Andrew's observation and their teachings that if we can master and apply these competencies in the relevant situations, there will be learnings that we will go through whereby we can mature the competencies where we need more training, more adaptability, more on-the-job experience, and we will become an exceptional leader. And in today's world, we need exceptional leaders to drive the healthcare industry so that the disruptions and other factors that are impacting the healthcare industry can be steered in such a way that it can support the ecosystem of patients, caregivers, clinical staff, the vendors who are supporting with the devices, technologies, software application, governance models, risk managements, as well as a whole slew of governmental and commercial payer communities. So the well-cultivated self-awareness with leading with conviction and applying emotional intelligence will form the first of this framework so that we can ground our leadership competencies to learn further capabilities or competencies into our toolbox. So once you have a sufficient level of self-awareness, a conscious self-awareness or well-cultivated self-awareness, now you are in a position to jump into the second competency framework, compelling vision. So in the compelling vision, it's very straightforward. How do you develop a vision? And once you develop a vision, how do you communicate that vision? And in order for people to listen to their vision, listen to your vision, how do you take that baby steps in earning the trust and loyalty of your team? Because without that, nobody is going to listen to your vision. Nobody is going to follow your vision. Nobody is going to make your vision a reality. Now, connecting with earning trust and loyalty, we jump into the third domain, a real way with people. These are all about communicating with people. What would be the first step to communicate with the people? You start listening to them. You start listening like you really mean it. It's not like paraphrasing what they said. It's not putting your thoughts into their perspectives. It is walking in their shoes and understanding what they are going through. Once you have comprehended their context, then you can give great feedback to them. Like you mean it, like it's applicable for them, not like the experience which you had from implementing those steps. But these feedback makes sense based on their context, their situations, their realities, and they can apply in their state, in their current state. Now, aligning with giving great feedback would be mentoring them, more structured way of bringing those awareness into their leadership competencies, how we would be able to make them more and more effective. The next step would be how to develop a high performance team. So we've listened to them, we give great feedback to them, we mentor them. Now we are taking them into a high performance team. And the last one is, in order to sustain that high performance, we have to constantly energize the staff. So the 5 competencies in the domain a real way with people is a complete circle of connecting with the people, starting with listening, giving feedback, mentoring them, developing them into high performance, and sustain that high performance by energizing them on an ongoing basis. Now comes the last domain. How do we exceptionally deliver the project through masterful execution? In order for us to execute the project, it starts with generating that informal power. How do we authentically, without the title of a leader, generate that informal power, working with leaders, understanding them, understanding the context, understanding the big picture, and making sure that the leaders listen to us based on the subject matter expertise, based on the authenticity, based on the credibility that we bring to the table. The next step would be, how do we build a true consensus? As a leader, you have to have all voices heard. And with all of those voices, how do we build a true consensus so the team can align with your vision, your mission, your project, and they can deliver the project following the tactics behind the masterful execution. The third one will be mindful decision making. You are making the decisions based on the relevance, based on the context, based on the constraints, based on the resources available, based on taking steps forward. And then that would follow driving results, because not only the project delivery, but how do we showcase the results that this project has delivered, which is aligned with the institutional goals, institutional vision and mission, and how effectively those results will then lead to creativity stimulation. And finally, healthcare is constantly changing. How do we cultivate the adaptability of this? So now we bring all of these 16 competencies together. And how do we apply these competencies in real day-to-day organizational systems to produce that lasting leadership effectiveness? Now, leadership, as we have discussed in many times, it's not just an individual pursuit. Leaders definitely do need to take responsibility for their own learning and growth. But the organization that they belong will also play a critical role in supporting the leadership development. So a sustainable approach, it often requires moving beyond the needs of individual leaders to consider an organizational-wide picture of building that leadership capacity. Let's take an example of what this means. Let's take Cleveland Clinic. Their leadership development is built into system-wide programs. Every physician leader have to attend the structured leadership academy that reinforces consistent practices across the entire health system, ensuring that leadership is not left to chance or an occasional spur, but it is a conscious, consistent way of applying these learnings in a day-to-day practice. We discussed in MD Anderson Cancer Center, we have Leadership Institute, which has a step-by-step way of building these competencies, starting with leading oneself. Once I am able to understand myself and the different aspects of myself, both the soft skills as well as my subject matter expertise by which I am asked to perform in an institution like MD Anderson, then I am ready to leading teams. Once I can successfully lead teams, then I can lead the leaders. And once I can lead the leaders, you are automatically at the executive level, thinking from a bigger picture. And not only the Leadership Institute provide constant calibration of your knowledge, your skills, it also provides a paradigm for you to build your experience. Because learning is one thing, unless and until you receive opportunities to practice it and to learn from it, leadership competencies would be like driving a bicycle or riding a bicycle. You can take the book, you can read all you want, but until and unless you take the bicycle, you walk with the bicycle, you run with the bicycle, you slowly step onto the pedal of the bicycle, then you climb on the bicycle, then you fall down a few times, you bruise, then you try again and again and again. And the more you see other people riding the bicycle, that gives you the inspiration to ride again rather than giving up. And finally, one day, that magic will happen where you can get onto the seat, and then you are smoothly riding the bicycle. Falling will happen again and again when you take those U-turns and 90-degree turns and all of those things. So it's a constant learning, constant enjoyment, constant fun, constant fall, constant bruising, constant pain, and you evolve from somebody who doesn't know how to learn bicycle or how to learn how to ride the bicycle to a novice learner, to an early stage learner, to a mature learner, and to advanced learning capabilities. So now let's take a look at the different ways by which we can look into the systems approach of leadership development. So let's think from a bigger picture. Why systems matter? So imagine a hospital that prides itself on recruiting the top doctors and nurses. Every year, they run leadership workshops, maybe like a half a day seminar on communication or decision making or other topics, collaboration, risk management. Some of these leadership topics as a half day seminar. The staff really enjoys coming together, networking with each other, learning probably most of the topics that have been discussed. They would enjoy doing some of these cohort projects. They would have a whiteboard scripting everything that they learned, that they experienced, practiced. They will also present their ideas in the class. But class, do you honestly think that anything would change? I don't think anything would substantially change with this kind of approach. This hospital reported patient satisfaction, absolutely no change. Finances, no change. Turnovers are still high. Why? Only because the leadership development was treated as an one-off event, not as part of the fabric of the organization, not as part of the system of the organization, not as part of the culture of the organization. Now let's take a different hospital. So instead of offering an isolated workshop or a series of workshops, imagine this hospital built a leadership academy. It's modeled after Cleveland Clinic, MD Anderson, John Hopkins, and other prestigious organizations. So here, every potential leader, from supervisors, charge nurses, to department leaders, administrators, maybe even mixing the clinical and non-clinical leaders, went through a structured program which lasted 3 months, 6 months. And the leadership learning has been into a structured program tied to hospital strategy, tied to their performance, tied to the key metrics coming from their teams. I would bet within 3 years, patient satisfaction scores will rise up, the staff engagement will improve, the decision-making process will change, the application of leadership competencies in tough situations will absolutely be impacted, and the hospital's financial stability will strengthen. So this pattern holds true even in other industries. I have heard many industries. Google is very famous. Microsoft is famous. GE, Their leadership pipeline programs often rotate executives through multiple global assignments. They want to make sure that their leaders are prepared for a system level leadership. I don't think, at least I haven't heard this rotation of leadership in the healthcare. I would strongly advocate for that. A leader in oncology department, other than probably clinical leaders, they need to be moved into cardiology. They need to be moved into ICU. They need to be moved into pharmacy. They can be part of the administration. Over a period of time, you are building a well-evolved, seasoned leader who can manage clinical, non-clinical shifts, exempt employees, different type of crisis that can happen in both administration and clinical side of the house. You can pair leaders with quality improvements. All of those will become a direct, tangible asset for a healthcare system where their team is now well balanced with respect to all of the leadership competencies applied in different situations. So that's why systems matter rather than one or two or few leaders who can exemplify exceptional leadership. So leadership development, you would agree, has a ripple effect across the entire organization. It affects the patient care. It directly impacts the financial performance. It definitely would have a public reputation. It would have a strategic importance. But for everything to work, it must be approached as a strategic and system-wide initiative rather than a series of one-off disconnected training programs or even connected training programs, but not connected with the strategy and the daily fabric of the organizations. So hospitals, as well as other companies or industries that take this structured approach, consistently report stronger outcomes. It's not because they train more, but because they train with purpose and alignment. So now speaking of alignment, now let's take a look at strategic alignment of how this leadership development can be part and parcel of a system. So one of the most common pitfalls, many organizations, many hospitals, many health systems, even today, treat leadership as a side project. It's disconnected from the real mission and strategy of the organization. So strategic alignment means tying the leadership growth directly to the organization's vision, values, and goals. Let's take another example, Mayo Clinic. So at Mayo Clinic, leadership development is not just a training program. It is embedded into the way they measure the performance. Every leader's growth plan is directly connected to patient care outcomes, the organizational performance, the team alignment, the turnover rates, the employee feedback. All of this will communicate to you that Mayo Clinic didn't approach leadership development as an abstract. It is practical and mission driven so that they would be able to bring to the world at large a mission driven change when they think from patients and caregivers and other groups that interact with their facility. So senior leaders, executive leaders play a very critical role. When they set the tone and prioritize leadership development, it signals to the entire organization that this is not optional. At Cleveland Clinic, the top executives personally mentor high potential leaders. They reinforce that leadership excellence is central to organizational success. In MD Anderson, it operates the similar way. They have gone above and beyond, partnering with prestigious academic institutions like Rice University to bring the leadership program, to bring the coaching program, and certify executive leaders and selected leaders as coaches, and then deliver those coaching to the leaders across the institution. So, leveraging the capabilities, putting those capabilities into practice, and the evolution of leaders within the institution, looking at the big picture regarding how metrics changes would be the ground truth by which how leadership can be factored as a system. So finally, I would say alignment also means planning for the future through succession and growth strategies. The organization that comes to my mind is Kaiser Permanente. They link leadership development with long-term succession planning. And by doing so, they ensure rapid continuity, immediate continuity, so that when a senior leader retires, there is already a well-prepared successor ready to step in. This is probably a debated topic in human resources. Do you promote within, or do you bring leaders from outside as fresh perspectives? Both has their own pros and cons. It all depends upon the organization, the system, as well as the leader who is exemplifying, demonstrating, displaying that lived experience on a day-to-day basis. So the bottom line is, when leadership aligns with mission, vision, and strategy, it becomes more than just training or an event. It becomes a powerful engine for organizational transformation. Now let's take a look at how do we attract and select the right leaders. Not just about filling a position because that position is empty and we need some kind of supervision given to the organization so that that role can be satisfied. Organizations with purpose focus on building a pipeline for the future. And too often, organizations make the mistake of promoting people simply because they have been around the longest and not because they have demonstrated true leadership potential. Even today, it is a reality that people get promoted because they know someone, not because they have exemplified the true capabilities, the true potential, and they really would be able to perform the next job successfully. And too often we always see that when wrong people are promoted to the next step, it's very difficult for them to demonstrate the leadership that is required by that position, and they won't last long. So better approach is to cast a wide net and create structured pathways for building emerging leaders. Not only this brings the succession planning into practice, but it also sends a message to everyone that their career map and the road path or the roadmap to the leadership is well structured. So, John Hopkins, they run a very highly competitive administrative fellowship programs. And these fellowship programs are designed to attract young professionals with leadership potential and immerse them in the real world healthcare operations. Similar to John Hopkins, there are several other institutions, academic medical centers, who follow the same fellowship programs. So by the time the fellow graduate from this 12 months, 16 months, 18 months program, they're not just competent managers. They are prepared to step into senior roles, directors and above, where they can bring a larger organization into the fold of the leadership that is required for those organizations to advance to the next level. Cleveland Clinic, along with others, invest in physician leadership programs. Physician leadership is extremely critical. Identifying doctors who have both clinical excellence and who have innate interest in organizational leadership. And these physicians would receive targeted development opportunities, making sure the next generation of leaders is not just clinically skilled, but strategically prepared. So the key here is the structure, the systems approach. So using fair and transparent selection process, it helps ensure that high potential talent is not overlooked. Whether it is through fellowship, residency programs, leadership academies, the goal always is to identify those who can grow into leaders that the organization would need tomorrow. So attracting and selecting leaders is not a short-time fix to staff a position, but it's a long-term investment in building the organization's leadership capacity. So stepping into a leadership role is probably one of the biggest transition in anyone's career. Imagine being an excellent nurse or physician or an administrator. Now suddenly you became an executive director, a department head, a chair position, and the skill set that is required from you is completely different. So without the preparation, many new leaders feel overwhelmed, isolated, exposed to situations where they have no context on how to act, and they are not sure how to succeed in that particular role. And that's why structured onboarding is so important. It's not enough to simply hand someone a new title. Organizations have the responsibility to support them with mentorship, rotations, checking with them, making sure they have the required educational context, fun-filled practice sessions, a paradigm where they can share their experiences and gather practical thoughts, actions, whereby they would be able to make a difference. So Cleveland Clinic, every new physician leader goes through a very structured onboarding program. They're not just staffed as a physician leader. They have to onboard themselves into leaders. I remember when I joined PricewaterhouseCoopers, it was a 3-month onboarding program before they staff you into a client project. And those 3 months, they prepare you, they prepare a cohort of team with elements of fundamental leadership, steps by which you would handle all of the known complex problem statements. You prepare your vision, you prepare your actions, you practice in safe zones, and you learn from those practices. You get challenged by senior leaders, where each of the 16 competencies that we learned, they master as part of everyday routine in those 3 months. And in our cohort, we were like 21st cohort, and we all recollected the before me and the after me. It was two different persons. So those programs, systematic programs, brings you the champion within you. MD Anderson champion, Cleveland Clinic champion, John Hopkins champion. So these leaders represent the brand that these brand of those organizations. So these programs ensures that these leaders don't just survive, they thrive in these new roles. So I would say, think of it this way. Onboarding is like teaching someone to swim. You don't just throw them into the deep end and hope that they will figure it out. Many hospitals, many organizations, many companies are simply doing that. Just because you saw an employee who had exceptional performance in one role, now is getting promoted to the next role, just throwing them into the deep end of the swimming pool and sit back and figure out and think that they would figure it out. So if leadership is part of the organizational system, you guide the employee, you provide the safety nets, and you gradually increase the responsibility until they are fully confident. So preparing new leaders is not a luxury. In today's world, it's an essential step to build sustainable leadership pipelines. So every organization would identify a formal or informal group of people called high potentials. Let's call them as hippos. So hippos or high potentials are a group of people who are identified formally or informally. The moment you go to the department, every employee would speak about the hippo. Hippos would have answers for questions. They would know how to position themselves. They show strong performance today and even greater promise for tomorrow. But here is the challenge. If you don't intentionally develop hippos, you risk losing them, either to a disengagement or to another organization that would invest more in their growth. Let's take GE's leadership development program, which is worldwide known. For decades, it has been one of the most recognized models in this globe. High potentials are placed in planned stretch assignments. They are rotated across the functions. They are rotated across the geographies. They are given direct exposure to the senior executives. And the result was this investment of GE paid off by creating a steady stream of future CEOs and top leaders. In healthcare, Kaiser Permanente would come at the top. They have built similar programs, giving their high potential opportunities to, or high potential leaders, with opportunities to lead cross-functional projects tied directly to system-wide priorities. So these assignments will prove to those individual leaders, while they learn and grow, while they build their competencies in a measured way, the loyalty to the organization, the way they would communicate to other team members, they emulate and simulate the same patterns to the other organizations. So it creates a system, an organizational fabric or organizational system or organizational culture. So Cleveland Clinic executives have this program in regularly mentoring high potentials. They provide coaching that goes beyond technical skills. And this direct engagement signals that organization values their growth and sees them as part of its future. So developing these high potential or hippos, it's not about favoritism. It's about ensuring that the people with greatest capacity can lead and build the organization to the next level. So they are given the opportunities, resources, and guidance to fulfill that potential. So because when high potential succeed, the entire organization will succeed. So some of the most powerful leadership lessons, I don't think it happens in the classrooms. Yes, you can simulate. You can learn from each other. You can practice in the whiteboard. You can organically come up with several different ways by which you can solve those problems. But the leadership in reality, it happens through experience. Developmental experience, I would say, they are the real world laboratories where leaders are tested, where leaders are stretched, where leaders are molded and shaped for leading the next generation challenges. So I mentioned Kaiser Permanente. Emerging leaders in Kaiser Permanente are rotated through clinical, financial, and operational roles. And this cross-functional exposure gives them a broad understanding of the system and prepares them for senior leadership positions. So instead of only seeing one slice of the organization, they learn how all these pieces fit together. Mayo Clinic, they uses action learning projects where high potentials are assigned to tackle real organizational challenges, such as improving patient flow or enhancing the quality metrics. So these projects give leaders a chance to practice decision making, problem solving, collaboration, different type of context, different type of personas interacting in those contexts. And in many times, a safe but a high impact environment. So outside of healthcare, I can immediately think about Google. Google have something called as stretch assignments. They deliberately place employees into roles outside of their comfort zones. And the logic is simple. Growth comes from challenge. Leaders are not just evaluated on how they maintain the status quo, but on how they innovate, how they adapt, how they would solve new complex problems. And these experiences matter, class, because they simulate the pressures of leadership while still offering a safety net. I closely monitored the medical tourism project that you are all part of. So group A, group B, the dynamics within each of these groups, how some people were available, how some people were not available, how some people collaborated, how some people didn't collaborate. Those who rose as leaders, who took the lion's share of work, who brought everybody together, now have got new tools in their toolbox. So every experience, every opportunity that you get, whether you are in an organization where leadership is part of the system or not, I would strongly suggest you jump in. I tell all of my team members, my mentees, my coaches, that every job is a preparation for the next job. So every opportunity that you get, in order for you to expose yourself, you should comfortably and confidently jump into that paradigm. Why? Once you have these competencies as tools in your toolbox, you can now get opportunity to experiment it. And unless you experiment it, you will not be able to learn from it. Unless you learn, you will not be able to master. Unless you master, the credibility will not be built. It'll be one of credibility where you get spur of opportunities where you can display it. So, in short, the developmental experiences, don't treat them as assignments. They are literally proving grounds for the next generation of leaders. So, this is a very interesting topic. This is probably the hardest but most valuable parts of leadership development. It is feedback. We are all human beings at the end of the day. We want to hear consistently that we do a good job. If we get a feedback, either passive or active, it will have like an emotional impact on us. Let's take a context. How many of you received feedback like, oh, you are doing fine, just keep it up? Yeah, it will feel good, especially if it's coming from your boss. But look at the feedback. It is so vague. It will not help you grow. You always need high quality feedback. So high quality feedback is like a mirror. I want to know how pretty my face is, how muscular I look, or how obese I look. Unless I can see myself in the mirror that I am obese, my hair is not done, my face is not done, I will not be able to even take a baby step to fix it. So high quality feedback shows you both your strength and the areas you need to work on. Unfortunately or fortunately, it is something that creates an impact in you. And this class, all of you, should value that feedback. We clearly went through the steps in processing the feedback, recognizing what that feedback is doing within, how to match those feedback, how to isolate you from the feedback, how to identify the areas that you need to develop measurably to achieve that feedback, how to make sure that you can have that effect back, looking at the mirror, saying that, yes, I worked on it, and reward yourself for working diligently to make sure that the feedback is put into practice. Let's take a new company. Let's take Adobe. I don't think I have got the opportunity to discuss Adobe in this class. So Adobe realized their traditional annual performance reviews were not working. And I would say that any organization, if you're only getting annual performance reviews, the organization is doing injustice for your growth. Now, we don't have to sit here and blame the organization. If you want to actively build the rigor of your leadership competencies, you will seek out for feedback. You want to make sure that you have a full view regarding the blind spots that you bring to the table. So, in this annual performance review feedback, take a look at your emotions before that feedback. Employees would dread them. What does managers want to do? Managers don't like giving hard feedback to their team. It's always pleasure to let the team members and other people know that how good they're doing. It brings that natural emotions of happiness, joy. But if you want to give a tough feedback, managers, I would say majority of them avoid. It's one of the hard trait that you need to build on how to communicate tough feedback to your team. And by the time feedback was delivered, maybe this happened month 1, month 3, month 6, month 8, month 10, month 11, even month 12. If it didn't happen the day before or the day off, the feedback is irrelevant. So if your boss comes to you and give you a feedback that of an incident that happened months back or weeks back, disregard it. It's not relevant. You who did it has now changed. You have, every day we are changing. Every day we are learning. Every day we are processing professionally, personally, community-wise, interaction with others. So feedback for an event that happened a week back, absolutely not relevant. So what did Adobe do? They replaced this annual performance review with a very simple system called check-ins. Some of you, if you're technology inclined, in the technology world, it used to be, I collect all the requirements of my users. I go into a black box. I consciously put these requirements into different components, build a glorious application, come back after 3 years and show this application to the users. Guess what happened? Money is lost, time is lost, opportunities are lost, competitive advantage is lost. Why? Because 3 years is a long time for any business to survive without having that competitive edge as part of their daily fabric. This is very similar in the annual performance review. If your boss is not giving review on a day-to-day basis, may not be very formal, maybe informal, pointing all of the different strengths you bring to the table, pointing all of the areas you can improve, depending upon the context, depending upon the situation, depending upon how you performed, the value of that feedback is less. So part and parcel of my own leadership practices, I will call my team members soon after a meeting is over, soon after an event has happened, on what they did right, how they can become more right, how they can become that exceptional employee by building these 2 or 3 things into their toolbox. So in MD Anderson, we have something called as 360-degree feedback. Physicians, administrators, and leaders, not only they get the feedback from their supervisors, but also from their peers, staff, and sometimes even from patients. And when you have this comprehensive view, leaders would understand the full impact of their behavior, of their performance. So here is the key. Leaders must learn not only to give feedback effectively, but also to receive with openness. Me as a leader should ask my team member, how am I performing? How did I perform in this particular situation? Are there anything else that I can do differently so that you would be able to do your job much more effectively? How can I bring more resources? What can I do differently? What would you need from me? All of these questions would spark insights into how your leadership potential can be made more and more effective. It's not primarily whether you look good or bad or ugly. It is only for how effectively you would be able to perform. You and performance are two different things. Many times we mix these two, and that's why we go into this emotional turmoil. And that's why leaders shield themselves from constructive criticism. And if you do that, it stunts your growth. When leader model vulnerability by asking for feedback and demonstrating to the team how they're acting on it, now they're creating a culture where feedback is seen as an opportunity and not as a threat. So the truth is, feedback is not always comfortable, but without it, leadership development doesn't happen. Growth doesn't happen. Now let's take a look at succession planning. So succession planning, in a nutshell, is making sure an organization is not caught off guard. It's not just about replacing a CEO or the vice president gets promoted to a CEO or an executive director gets promoted to vice president. It is about ensuring that every critical role has a successor who is ready and can fulfill that role. So Cleveland Clinic, Kaiser Permanente, all have deliberate succession planning in practice. Let's take a classic example. IBM is a classic example. So they have invested in grooming multiple leaders for future roles. And that's the reason why they have been able to transition the CEOs very smoothly without destabilizing the company. They treat leadership as a renewable resource, not as a fixed asset. So think about the culture when you're working for IBM. The culture is always focus on people, focus on people, focus on people, focus on people. Focus on leadership, focus on leadership, focus on leadership. Focus on growth, focus on growth, focus on growth. It'll be absolutely a phenomenal experience working for companies like that because you know you are on the road of growth. You know you are organically fixing yourself without you even knowing it, and you become more and more and more seasoned leader. So succession planning doesn't just secure the future. It sends a powerful message to each and every employee that we believe in your potential and we are preparing you for bigger and bigger responsibilities. And what will that message do? That message builds loyalty. That message builds engagement. That message builds ambition and drive. That message proves to each and every employee that I am going to realize something more than what I can even imagine of. So the lesson here is simple. Leadership transitions are inevitable. The only question is whether your organization will be ready or unprepared. So succession planning makes the difference between continuity or chaos. So now let's take a look at monitoring results. So how do we know the leadership development is actually working? These are all hard investments that institutions make to prepare the leaders, to invest in education, to rotate people in different departments, to provide them with resources other than education to help them become the leader. And many times, organizations blindly invest without even measuring the impact. It's like in healthcare, you're giving treatment to a patient without checking whether they are getting better or not. So, strong organizations would treat leadership development as a strategic investment. It's the same way you treat a personal coach as an investment. You treat an athletic coach as an investment. Something different has to happen. Your performance has to be different. Now you can successfully run half a marathon. You can lift all of those weights. All of those demonstrate to you that your investment has paid off. Let's take examples of few hospitals. Cleveland Clinic, we talked about Cleveland Clinic a lot. They don't just run leadership academies. They track whether leaders who go through them can produce patient engagement, patient satisfaction, team engagement, retention, financial performance. They go through all of this and compare with the leadership development. They want the proof that development is making a measurable difference. Similarly, Kaiser Permanente, they connect leadership to system-wide goals such as quality metrics, employee engagement, outcomes, the turnovers. So if the leadership development is in moving the needle, now you have to adjust the program. The continuous feedback loop ensures to an organization that they are utilizing the resources wisely. So even outside healthcare, whether it's Microsoft, Google, IBM, they all measure the ROI of leadership training by tracking their innovation, by tracking the performance of the department, rating the productivity, employee satisfaction. And when they revamp the leadership models, how did the cultural transformation happen? Engagement surveys, performance outcomes. It has to showcase leadership development had directly strengthened the company. The key here is alignment. Choose the metrics that truly matters, which would give you the value of your investment. Now let's wrap up chapter 17. I'm sincerely hoping that these discussions have brought the necessary rigor for any organization that you work for to make leadership as part of their system. It is not an isolated event. When it is done right, when it is part of the system, we have seen organizations with patient satisfaction impact, financial performance impact, employee engagement impact, at the end of the day, the brand of the organization impact. So leadership development, I would say it's building like a strong bridge. Strategic alignment is the foundation. And without that foundation, the bridge will not hold its ground. Attracting and selecting leaders is the construction. And you need, in order for the construction, the right materials, the right people, right processes. And preparing new leaders are the support beams that ensures stability. So developing high potentials and giving them experience are the reinforcements which would keep the bridge strong over time. Feedback and succession plannings are the regular inspections that prevent cracks that would occur in a bridge in becoming total failures. And finally, monitoring results will be like a traffic report showing us if the bridge is working as intended, the traffic flow is happening as expected, and you can also look for improvements that are needed. There are so many examples we discussed. We discussed Cleveland Clinic, we discussed Mayo Clinic, MD Anderson, Kaiser Permanente, GE, Microsoft, PricewaterhouseCoopers, IBM, and all of those. So the bottom line is this. The leadership development is a systems approach. It is not just a good idea, it is a sustainable practice that secures organizations' future. Without these systems, leadership growth becomes an accidental event. With systems, leadership growth becomes intentional and transformational. Thank you, class.